Then I picked up the Sunday paper and read a story that, I hope, has given Americans the sort of pause that chills the blood. It was a postscript to the suicide of Jean Seberg, the young actress from Iowa, an expatriate in France, who was found dead in her car, leaving an empty bottle of barbiturates and a note. The postscript was released by the government, by, in fact, the FBI, and it's certainly to the credit of its present chief that he released a detestable confession which reinforces the suspicion that for many years the FBI, in the hands of J. Edgar Hoover, its first and long-time head, could hardly be matched by any government for malice and cunning. Miss Seberg at one time was a passionate supporter of leftist causes and made no bones about it. In Mr. Hoover's view, she became, like the late Martin Luther King, a social nuisance whom it was necessary to intimidate, then to bug, in the hope of breaking their will. Some anonymous source one day got in touch with the FBI and passed on to them a rumor, or an invented smear, that Miss Seberg was pregnant by one of the Black Panther leaders. The source suggested to Hoover that if this rumor could be fed to gossip columnists, it would help tarnish Miss Seberg's image as a glamorous young movie star from the Middle West. "Very good," said Mr. Hoover. "A fine idea." So the Bureau fed the item. Most papers turned it down, but a Hollywood writer, what is politely known as a lady columnist, printed it. Pretty soon Jean Seberg saw it, living in Paris. There are always good friends alert enough to see that you get the nastiest clippings. From that moment on, Jean Seberg was a doomed girl. She was pregnant by her husband, the French novelist Romain Gary. But, as he said last weekend, while she was intelligent and courageous, she did not possess a tough hide, the ruthlessness that can tolerate an outrage against oneself. She saw the item and within hours went into premature labor, was delivered by caesarean section of a girl who died within days. She took the dead baby back to Iowa in a glass coffin as a glaring proof that the baby was white. An excessive reaction, perhaps, but in 1970 she knew that the FBI could and did destroy hundreds of radicals and non-radicals. Romain Gary says that on each succeeding anniversary of the baby's death, she attempted suicide. Finally, last week, she made it. A former FBI man who was with the Bureau at the time had no other justification to offer for this barbarity than to say that getting involved in radical politics could get you involved in national security, that the kid with a picket sign might turn into the kid with a bomb. And he said, you just keep going down the line. Well, for too long the FBI went down the line of its own improvised rules, as we can horribly see once the Freedom of Information Act made it possible for you and me, the ordinary citizen, to go to government files, including the files of the FBI, and read anything and everything which had been kept under wraps as confidential government information. Congress has up for debate in this session, and its committees are already taking testimony on it, a new law, a charter of do's and don'ts, a legal charter of behavior for the FBI. Admittedly, it's extremely difficult to set strict public rules for the main investigating arm of a Department of Justice, and the Western nations are just now boggling over the problems of maintaining intelligence systems which are at once efficient and decent. Maybe it cannot be done. You've only to read something like A Man Called Intrepid about the workings of the British Secret Service and the cooperation of Prime Minister Churchill and President Roosevelt during the Second War, to realize that there was a secret war being fought by the most powerful men in the alliance, which makes the history books seem naive and romantic. Roosevelt once confided to a friend that if the Congress had ever had a hint of the shifts and manoeuvres he was engaged in with the British before this country got into the war, he would have been impeached. And many of these manoeuvres involved brutal decisions and secret tricks not at all unlike the techniques of James Bond. We can now salve our conscience by saying that, after all, Hitler was the enemy, we were fighting to survive, and that it was essential for us to go beyond any traditional code of open warfare. However, these tricks and shifts passed over when the war was over from the main secret intelligence body, the OSS, into the running of the CIA, which was set up after the war. Watergate, of course, more than anything, did enormous damage to the reputation of the CIA and the FBI, and when all the dirt was shovelled out from under, President Ford's Attorney General revamped the FBI and set his own strong rules. It was the present head of the FBI who chose to make public the disgraceful treatment of Jean Seberg. Roman Gary said he was grateful. He'd always maintained that she had been destroyed by the FBI, but he said, if the post-Watergate FBI had not issued a confirmation, to this day I would have been considered a mythomaniac. I think if this sad wind has blown any good, it must be in the thought that the Seberg case will quicken the conscience of the Congress and sharpen its wits, and make it get busy writing and passing the new legal charter of the FBI.